Yesterday, Australia brought in some hate speech laws, which were designed to basically crack down on freedom of speech and stop criticisms of a certain Middle Eastern country and a certain political movement starting with Z. The full name of it is Combating Anti-Semitic Hate and Extremism Criminal and Migration Laws Act 2026. This was passed just 2 days ago. It was brought in after the Bondi massacres. There were laws bringing down on speech laws, as also laws against firearms, firearm restriction laws. Basically, George Orwell will be rolling over in his grave. This is an incredibly Orwellian process that's happened through. It was rushed through Parliament in a matter of a few days. Everyone voted on it straight away. It went straight through. Only a handful of senators abstained. Shout out to Senator Fatima in the Labor Party. Fatima Payman, she didn't do it, but there were a lot that did. There was back and forth between the bills. Originally, it was about 140 pages. Now it's about 56 pages. However, in this video, I'm going to go through all of the things in this bill that are disgusting, Orwellian, and will make your hair stand on end. Now, I'm no expert. However, you don't need to be an expert to understand this. I'm no lawyer. I'm no politician. I'm just a layman. So as a layman, I'm going to take you through all of this stuff and we can go through it together and I can show you the extent of how horrendous this bill is. So I can sit here and I can spend a lot of time going through each individual point, but that would take me years. I'm just going to try and take you through the most important points. I'm going to put a link in the description so you can go and read the entire bill yourself. I recommend every Australian go and read the bill and try to get an understanding as best they can. So right off the bat, cracking down on, quote, preachers and leaders in the community. Any religious or spiritual leader, as you can see here, a religious or spiritual leader, they can be imprisoned for up to 12 years. Now, what do they find? Any religious official or spiritual leader or any other leader who provides religious instructions or pastoral care. Part one is they're trying to crack down on religious leaders, aka Islam, because this will only be applied to Islam and no other religion. A person commits an offense if the person commits the offense, the conduct is engaged by a person or person as a capacity as a religious official or a spiritual leader. So if you're the leader and imam at a masjid, if you're not even an imam, you're just running a group as a quote unquote spiritual leader, you can be charged and imprisoned for up to 12 years. 12 years for speech because it's religiously motivated, quote unquote. The charge will be aggravated for up to 12 years. Now, you might think, what do they mean legally by a religious official? So the definition is right here. Religious official includes a person who performs religious functions, including a person who leads worship or provides religious instructions, whether or not the person has been appointed formally or informally. So that's key. So you don't have to be an imam. You can be a person that's led a prayer, and that's considered a person leading worship. So therefore, if you're charged with a hate crime, your charge will be aggravated by up to 12 years imprisonment. This also doesn't include a religious official. It includes a spiritual leader. So anyone that provides a spiritual leader aspect. So you could run a non-for-profit charity feeding homeless people, and that might be deemed a spiritual leader, and you stand up against the Z lobby and Israeli lobby, and this could be classed as hate speech under these new laws. So on page 14, it goes through and defines what a hate crime is. For the purpose of the paragraph, it's a social, economic, psychological, and physical harm, including social, economic, blah, 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 constituting a hate crime. Basically what they're saying is if you criticize, this is so sloppily written, it's saying that if you criticize anyone and you've caused quote unquote social harm, for example, if you criticize Israel for committing a genocide, they can say that that is, quote, causing social harm to the Jewish community and can be deemed anti-Semitic, which is constituting a hate crime. A hate crime is also conduct that involves public inciting hatred of another person or group of people. This would all be in circumstances cause a reasonable person who is targeted or a member of the target group to be intimidated, to fear harassment or violence, or to fear their safety. Every day Muslims go out and just try and go through their everyday life and are harassed, they are berated, they are mocked, they are made fun of, they are targeted all day long by people in the media and people in real life. These laws will not protect these people. These laws will only protect the powerful and the zealous trying to continue on their G-side in Gaza. They're saying that if someone felt intimidated, so I could go to a police station and say, this person has intimidated me. This person is now liable to be charged under a hate crime. This is how lazily, sloppily, and vague these rules are. It's designed to be vague so they can apply it when convenient. That's every single law they ever bring in, designed to be vague so they can apply it whenever they need to. Now, this doesn't just go on to hate crimes. It also goes on to define what a hate group is. Now, the person that makes the final ruling on what the hate group is the Governor General. Long story short, they're the one that sign in the laws into power. There's a long back and forth, but basically the Governor General is the one that signs off on the laws. Now, the Governor General makes a prohibited hate group regulation specifying an organization. The AFP minister must be satisfied on the reasonable grounds has engaged in, prepared or planned, blah, 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 conduct a hate crime, which is what I was discussing earlier. So you can make a group that criticizes a certain people. You are not now then just categorized with a hate crime. You're categorized with a hate group. Has advocated for engaging in conduct constituting a hate crime. Further proof of what I was saying. What worse than that is you can be deemed a hate group and convictions not required. A person does not need to have been convicted of a hate crime in order for the AFP minister to be satisfied an organization has engaged in conduct of a kind mentioned in the paragraph. No procedural fairness required. They're not even hiding it. They're putting it in the legislation. The AFP minister is not required to observe any requirements of procedural fairness in deciding whether or not the AFP minister is satisfied for the purpose of this section. So hypothetically, the AFP minister, which is the leader of the Australian Federal Police, Australia's version of the FBI, basically, if he's satisfied that this certain group is a hate group, they don't even need to be convicted of a crime to be considered a hate group. Now, we'll go into later as to why this is such a horrendous slippery slope. They do, however, have a small amount of checks and balances, or probably just an illusion of checks and balances to try and make people feel like that this is safe and this is fair. So it says here, before the Governor General makes a prohibited hate group, regulation specifies an organization, the AFP must obtain the Attorney General's agreement in writing. So the Attorney General does need to sign off on this, but our government's all run by the same people, so this is just an absolute illusion. This isn't going to help in any way, shape, or form, really. I want to go now into the different offenses that can take place and the different penalties for talking. Not even inciting violence, just talking words from your mouth. Offenses: directing the activities of a prohibited hate group. A person commits an offense if they intentionally direct the activities of an organization, the organization is a prohibited hate group, and the person knows the organization is a prohibited hate group. And you could be imprisoned for 15 years. Most arrests don't get that long of imprisonment for causing horrific acts against another human being. Not only does the leader get a potential prison sentence, but any member of a prohibited hate group could be imprisoned for up to 7 years, any member in the whole group. And it goes further than that. If you recruit for a prohibited hate group, you can be imprisoned for up to 15 years. Now, you might sit there and think, well, this sounds like a good idea. This is cracking down on people spreading hate and spreading violence. This is what Australia needs right now after such a horrific attack. However, I want to point out to you the slippery slope of these laws that have just been put into place just a day ago. I want to give you an example. Say, for example, I go to my local mosque. At my local mosque, I give a speech about how I want a group of us to come together and start a protest against Israel's genocide in my local city. We start a movement we'll just call it Free Palestine. We go, we protest saying Free Palestine. This gets picked up. It's taken all over social media. We start to become famous. The AFP minister catches on to this because we're on the news. The AFP minister doesn't like what we're saying. He determines that we're actually a quote unquote hate group. He gives recommendation to the Attorney General. The Attorney General agrees that I've committed hate crimes by making a certain group feel intimidated and unsafe, and I've given them unfair criticism. They then deem that this is a hate group. I'm the leader of that group. I can then face up to 15 years in jail for being the leader of the group. I can face up to 15 years in jail for recruiting other people. The members in my group, they can be up to 7 years in jail and up to 15 years for recruiting people as well. On top of that, because I've done it at a local mosque, which is a place of worship, I can then have aggravated charges for up to 7 to 15 years for being a quote unquote spiritual leader. So these laws are an incredibly horrid, slippery slope and could cause horrible amounts of damage to so many people and could give the Zs exactly what they want. They're not just cracking down on quote unquote hate groups. This also extends to symbols. So I know for a while in Australia, a certain German historical movement, which I can't say on this platform, they've been banned. You're not allowed to display their flags anywhere. I said, I'm not associated with that group. However, this is a slippery slope and this is just going to open up the door to more crackdowns further on. And we're seeing the result of it right here, right now. Despite a certain Middle Eastern country committing a genocide against Palestinians, I know for a fact that they'll never make this group. In fact, it'll be quite the opposite. If you criticize a certain government for its genocidal actions, you'll be the one deemed a hate person and you'll be deemed as a committing a hate crime. I know that they've already had talks about HAMAS and another organization starting with H being listed as a quote unquote hate group. So if you display their flags, not that I'm going to display their flags. I mean, why would I? Or if you dress up as them, if you support them in any way, if you say that they are standing up against Israel and their regime, this could be considered a hate group, a hate crime, and you could be charged. While these groups have committed horrible acts, they have killed innocent people, they've also stood up to oppression. They have killed innocents. However, their record still remains genocide free, which can't be said of other groups. I also want to show you some of the definitions that they've used for words inside of this piece of legislation. So they've cracked down on immigration. Basically, I mean, they did this in America. If you criticize the Zionists and Israel, you can be sent back to your country. I mean, this was very effective in America, unfortunately, because a lot of the protesters were from overseas. So now they're employing the same thing over here in Australia, and it's not good. I just also want to get into some definitions that they've used. So they're saying that a person has an association for the purposes of the subsequent subsections with an organization if the person meets or communicates with the organization. I want to point out the association may consist of a single meeting or communication. So hypothetically, if you send someone a text message and they respond to you, they can be charged under this criminal legislation as well for sending a text message. That counts as a single form of communication. Now, if you think that I'm unfairly targeting people cracking down on quote unquote anti-Semitism, I just want to point you to this definition found on page 51. Anti-Semitism statements are an example of statements that involve harmful ideas based on superiority over or hatred of other persons on the basis of ethnic origins as mentioned in the subsequent in these sub-paragraphs. So they're outright stating that anti-Semitism is an example of what this legislation is designed about. Just remember, anti-Semitism is in the name of the legislation. I want to point out that the Jewish community only makes up 0.4% of Australia's entire population, yet they've got an entire bill dedicated to not criticizing them. Also, all of these Z lobbies all over the world, not just Australia, have said time and time again, as well as the think tanks, they've said time and time again, any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. So this is outright stating, it's not even hiding the fact that they want this to stop. They want to put this legislation in to stop criticizing Israel. I could go on for days and days about how bad this legislation is, but I think I'm just going to try and wrap this up. It's clear that the only religion that this is going to target is Islam. It's not going to target Christianity. It's not going to target Judaism. It's not going to target Hinduism. It's not going to target any other religion. It's only going to target Islam. The laws are vague. They are sloppy. They're intentionally designed to be interpreted whichever way you want. There's a lot of decision making by the AFP minister and the governor general. Everything's up to their discretion, basically, what's a hate crime, what's a hate group, etc. The problem isn't stopping violence or harassing. I obviously want that to not happen. I don't want anyone to be harassed or any violence to come to anyone. However, it's very clear that this is a Trojan horse designed to crack down on criticisms of Israel. It will be selectively enforced through its sloppy and vague language so it can be misapplied and applied where necessary. This was in the wake of the Bondi massacre. The fact that this legislation was created by the Z lobby, it was pushed through so quickly, in my opinion, gives further legitimacy to the claim that the Bondi massacre was really a false flag attack carried out by a certain intelligence agency starting with M and ending with D. I'm ashamed at our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He's the same Prime Minister that got Julian Assange free, one of the best, if not the best, journalists that have happened in the past 50 years. And now look what he's done. Julian Assange, I imagine, would just be absolutely disgusted at our Prime Minister for what he's done. So anyway, I'm Ali J. This is my first proper video. I'd like you to like it, subscribe, check out my TikTok, check out my shorts. I've got a lot more content coming out, and I'm going to continue to talk about this because this is one of the worst breaches of free speech, one of the most Orwellian breaches of free speech anywhere in the Western world and basically anywhere in the world right now.